Hello and welcome to all my viewers to the Alexandra Wenman show. I'm so excited today about my guest because I've known her for a while now and she's just awesome. We have a lot in common. So I want to introduce you to the lovely Tash Mitch, who is known as the Energy Alchemist. Tash, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. Like we were just saying, we've had so many conversations that have been really expansive. So it's an absolute honor and pleasure to be invited here and also to see you and witness your work. It's been stunning watching you interviewing all of these amazing people in the world of spirituality and wellness and wholeness. So yeah. Absolute honor.
Yeah, well, it's about time we got you on the show. We've talked about it for a long time, and obviously you've interviewed me a couple of times now. So I want to kick off this morning. I want to talk a little bit to you about transformation, because you've been through a bit of a transition in your work, haven't you? You used to be working with the chakras, am I right?
Yes. I still work with the chakras, but the sense that I've been getting is that my work has been expanding and to not narrow it down too much into just one area. So for me, I love structure, right? I like frameworks to work in, and I still work within specific frameworks, and the chakras is a really good framework to work in. But the guidance that I was getting and receiving was just to open things out more and to be very open for how things could come forward and how they could appear. And I feel with this work, it's really necessary, because when you're working with energy, there's a sense of always moving past your own boundaries and barriers. And the things that keeps us kind of like contained is the things that we're most comfortable with, right? Yeah. And so for me, chakras have become very, very comfortable to work with. But yeah, just opening the mind and opening the spectrum around that is where it's been for me now.
Everything is energy, right? So it does, like, it kind of sums you up beautifully, Tash, because you're so, you're so infinite, you're so in touch with that multidimensional divineness of who we are and the spiritual journey and everything. And I think it's such a lovely container to kind of put it in. If we're going to put a name to what you do, it just fits beautifully. We have so much in common, don't we? We've talked before a little bit on your show about sacred geometry as well, haven't we? You kind of work a lot with the sacred geometric shapes and symbolism too, don't you? How do you incorporate that into your work?
Well, when energy work has been like in my life for from the time that I can understand that things were connected and interlinked. Like, energy work has been there. Early on, I didn't have the language and articulation for it. And now that there's some kind of semblance of language and articulation, it's kind of like I'm just doing what I'm meant to be doing, right? But because energy obviously is, it's not tangible, it made sense to actually find something where I could offer people a way to relate to energy that was more tangible. And sacred geometry has offered that. Because the symbols allow us to plainly see how energy flows and how we flow with it, how we connect with it, how we can use it, how we can deepen our understanding of it. And how we can expand it as well. I mean, alchemy for me is a massive part of what I do, as I know it is for you as well, right? But that sort of sense of expanding our boundaries and expanding who we are and shifting and changing perceptions in order to allow that expansion to occur. I think sacred geometry is just a beautiful way to bring people into all of that, basically.
It's good, isn't it? I think it gives us a way of it's almost like a gateway into another space, another consciousness, another realm. Because I always think, well, they're comfortable, those shapes, they're familiar to us because we've seen them in the world around us and they're prevalent in nature. But at the same time, it's almost like the mind doesn't know exactly kind of what they stand for. It's always like, oh, what is this? What does this mean? It's the same with some of the sacred symbolism that's based on the sacred geometry, isn't it? It's almost like, a symbol as opposed to a sign is something, kind of represents something that we don't know, or the unseen, or the unknown, but putting it into a safe package. I really like that. So
yeah.
Container.
Yes, and also the real beauty of sacred geometry is that it allows you to see that there's a rhyme and reason, like there's a certain rhythm that energy, patterns itself and takes on, that actually starts to really inform us that we're not random. Do you know what I mean? Like we're not some sort of like random occurrence of, something that just happened because our mum and dad got together. Like basically there's a rhythmic element that means that our place where we are, wherever we are, we're there for a particular reason, and to really embody and own that, the presence of who we are because of that,
That's beautifully put. I want to go back to the beginning. How did you start with all of this? Did you have experiences when you were younger as a child, or did you open up to this more in adulthood? What was it? What led you on to this kind of journey?
My grandmother was like, she was this maverick woman, right? Very strong, very individual. I didn't see anybody that looked like her on my path but her. She was highly intuitive, incredibly accurate psychic.
Wow.
And I would watch her floor people time and time again with just knowledge of their timeline that she shouldn't have had access to, but did. And so she just blasts people wide open with that, because it's like we all have a kind of rhythm that we're comfortable with. And we kind of think we know what the capacity of other human beings are. And then when somebody actually is able to bring forward something that they should absolutely and utterly have no access of with such pinpoint, just blew people wide open. So for me, the journey into this kind of realm of being and, realm of living has actually just been quite normal in a lot of ways. Like she showed me a path. Yeah, she kind of showed me a path, and she showed me a template, but it wasn't really my template. Like her path was it was quite lonely in a lot of ways, but she was quite happy to be alone. She didn't have any peers. She didn't have anybody that she communicated with, because she just really stood alone. But in standing alone and being so strong, she gave, people in her environments something to come to. So people would come to her for healing, for intuitive understanding, for wisdom, for, wanting to know what the path was ahead and all of that kind of thing. For a deep sense of spirituality, she offered that to them, and she offered it really clearly to them. I wasn't so badass, basically. I was like really shy about all of that kind of stuff. The whole standing, in your power around that and just being alone with it. That wasn't kind of my road at all, So it took me a while to actually circle back. But in the background, that was always being developed, basically, because it's always been my path from childhood. It took me a while to.
Did she sort of take you aside and teach you, or were you more the observer of her?
I was the observer of her, and I was, I would say, probably the only grandchild, as far as I know of, because she had, a number of grandchildren, that was so interested, like really interested in what she was doing. And so she had like all of these books, like these magical texts and stuff. She used to make these amulets and things like that. And so I was like really involved for a time with her with that. She gave me my first deck of tarot cards. So it was kind of like that sort of sense of being an apprentice for the time that I was with her. Like she opened up her world to me. And opened up her own strength of spirituality to me. Like she basically, sometimes people can be very kind of veiled with what they're doing. With her, the relationship that we had, it was very open. Like I could see, her sort of like fasting for periods of time, or like, just basically preparing herself to bring forward information. I could see all of that going on. So she just offered me the template of what that could look like, and made it very normal.
Yeah.
Made it very normal.
That's amazing. And that's what you do now, right? You kind of make this all so much more accessible. And I think it's so important that we do normalize the conversation around spirituality and higher consciousness, because it is a normal part of our everyday lives. I mean, we are spirit in matter, right? So after you kind of grew up observing her, how did you first kind of step into the work that you now do? What was your the beginning of your, I suppose, your formal training or your unfoldment of your own gifts?
Well, I ended up going into media advertising because it's kind of like it was a lot safer.
Like with the editorial world.
Yeah, exactly. So I ended up working for the BBC, then working for Music Week and United Business Media, and then from there, the voice just got louder and louder to get onto this path. And energy work was where it was for me. I wanted to explore that. I wanted to understand that. And so I ended up going down the route of body work and massage, and really got into understanding how energy flows within the body and how it actually presents itself in people's everyday lives. And I got really deeply into that. So I ended up going to Thailand and studying Thai massage, going to India and doing Ayurvedic massage, and getting into the nuts and bolts of like structural integration and all of that kind of stuff. But it was really kind of the crux of that. The massage was an element, but it was really about the energy. And I didn't have the language at the time to make that accessible to people. So bodywork seemed like a real accessible way to bring people in and to introduce them to the energy element of things as well. But mostly it was about my learning about how energy flowed. And then after a while of doing that, it was probably about 10 years of doing that, the energy started shifting again. And there was a sense of it was becoming more and more consultation. So I would find like people would be on the table, and it was partly about the body work, but it was so much more about energetic consultation. That was what was going on, right? And it just grew more and more from there. It was kind of like, well, now I'm just doing energetic consultation, so let's just take it into that. And so then there was a shift.
Start to switch on, just your intuition just became stronger as you went further into the work and you were picking up things about people. And
yeah, so basically when I say energetic consultation, it was actually using the feeling and intuitive sense that I was getting from their bodies to actually reference what was going on in their lives, basically, and how it was appearing, like, you know, the things that were happening to them, whether it was friction, whether it was contractions around work, whether it was relationship, whether it was their own inner dialogue. Like, I was able to really reference how that was showing up in their body and to be very accurate with that. And so then people started to come more for the expansion of what was going on with them energetically, because I was working with them and then they were starting to see their life shifting and changing. And they were understanding the link between their bodies and the energy and how it was showing up for them. And then meanwhile, I was understanding what the flow was like, you know, when somebody's kind of like...
You like being able to follow the meridian lines and things like that. Like, do you tune into...
Sorry, say again.
I kind of was having a little vision of you tuning into the meridian lines and seeing like where there were blockages and sort of knowing how to read the body in that intuitive way. Amazing.
It was very much, yeah, it was very much like that. But again, it was very kind of real. So and for me, all the work that I'm doing is kind of coming back to reality, coming back to the nuts and bolts. You know, when we are experiencing blockages around the solar plexus, what kind of dialogue are we having with ourselves? Why are we contracting in on ourselves? How is that showing up in terms of how we're interrelating and relating to the world around us? You know, when we're having sort of blockages around the sacral and the lower belly area, like, how is that showing up in our sexuality and our ability to create and to manifest in the world? You know, it's kind of like bringing it really kind of into the nuts and the bolts, and then really referencing it to how that's showing up in their day-to-day lives, and really starting to see how the energy is flowing from them into the world, you know.
Amazing. So if people come for sessions with you now, how do you work now? What can people expect if they came in to see you for like a consultation or?
So now it's very much, I do a lot of online work with people, and I do a lot of face-to-face work with people. And I haven't actually done any body work element for probably the best part of 2.5 years now. It's been very much face-to-face. And literally what we would do is to look at an area that they want to expand on. So it could be that there's a transition going on where they're moving from one thing to another, whether it be a business, whether it be a relationship, whether it be a country, whatever it is that they're doing, they're moving from one area of their lives into something else. Or it could be like an internal expansion that they're feeling within themselves. Like they want to be something, they want to do something, but there's something that's always blocking that. Or they seem to be looping back to the same thing when it comes to that. So it could be like, for example, somebody that wants to get up and speak to a group of people, or somebody that wants to work with groups, or they just want to expand their business into a different sort of arena, that kind of thing. A lot of like going from one way of being and making a 180 shift into another way of being, that kind of thing. And so the work is really then about taking them through their energy and taking them through ways that they can actually expand their actual perception and frames of how they're looking at things, that then can expand what it is that they want to do and how they move into that, basically. So what I tend to see, sorry?
Sort of bring it down and ground it into their daily life.
Yes. Yeah. So what I tend to see a lot is people moving from, say, a corporate job into going into business for themselves, or like moving from a place where they feel really contracted about certain areas within their business into opening those out so there's more flow and success with that. A lot of moving as well into things like, for example, feeling the energy that's come forward from, say, like the mother's story or their father's story that's keeping them in contraction around their relationships, either with an intimate partner or just relationships with people in general, and opening that out. So there's a lot of kind of transitioning and opening and expanding that happens in my work. And it's really real, you know, you see people expanding. I saw one guy just basically after one session proposing to his partner and getting on a plane like a week later, you know, and having a honeymoon a week later. It's kind of like that kind of transition that happens basically.
Opening gateways for people, helping them open gateways for themselves.
Exactly. Yeah.
Amazing. And in terms of sort of where you want to take your work in future, have you got any plans coming up? Are there any plans to write anything or to create something new, or what's going on with you looking forward?
There's a lot of things that's happening moving forward. Basically, at the moment, I've been developing a lot of online programs. And again, very nuts and bolts, very kind of, so the one that I'm currently in at the moment is Money Clarity, because that's a massive one. And we don't always equate how we're being and our energy to the way that money shows up and manifests for us. So yeah, and again, using our energy centers to really bring people into how they're actually framing money, how the patterns of money has come forward as templates for them that are basically probably not serving, you know, that kind of thing. And also just opening our perceptions. And with that, I'm starting to see, again, just people having like massive shifts around how they're relating to what they can receive money-wise, what they can ask for, you know, what they can open themselves up for, that kind of thing.
It's amazing. It's so important that we look at this, especially, you know, and for our viewers as well, because obviously a lot of people, as we know, ourselves included on the spiritual path, tend to, you know, come into this work with a bit of an allergy to money or making money, and it's like you kind of have to learn to value yourself before the actual real value of your work starts to show up. And there's such a minefield around money, isn't there? I mean, I do a lot of work as well, helping people clear their blocks to abundance and things, and the amount of limiting beliefs that can come in, like down through the ancestral line. Things like, I remember, you know, my father always saying, money doesn't grow on trees, you know, and, you know, those common phrases like money is the root of all evil. But it's just energy like anything else, right? So it's, once you kind of dispel those myths about, you know, it's like any symbol, it's like any currency. It's how you use it. If you're using it for good and authentically, then it's going to flow better into your life, and you don't have to feel guilty about having it. I think there's so much of this, people going, I can't have money because then people will, you know, will think that I'm up on my high horse, or, you know, or people think I'm greedy, or there's so many programs. So it's really great that you're doing this work. What have you learnt yourself about money and your relationship to it since you started doing this work?
Oh, so much. The biggest relationship I've learned is money and sex.
Wow.
Like, I didn't realize how integrated that was until I started doing this work, and I was like, oh my God. Because basically, if we have shame around our sexuality, I read somewhere, and even saying this for a lot of people would be a taboo thing to say, right? But I read somewhere that basically somebody can have an orgasm at 4 years old. And so there's an element where, you know, you get some kids who just develop sexually very early in their lives. And a lot of times the parents don't know what to do with that. So they're really deeply shamed for it. Mm-hmm. And if you've come up from a religious background, even more so, like I grew up with like basically nuns who like sexuality.
Yeah.
You know, like they're not very open sexually. I mean, you know, they taught me in other ways, which was a really profound and beautiful, but sexuality wasn't one of them. More that it was more like putting a dampener and a lid on that, you know. So you become very shamed for sexual pleasure. You become very shamed for lusts and for desires. And this is a natural thing. It's written into our DNA. In fact, it's written into our DNA so closely that we can't procreate without it.
Exactly.
So we're going to feel, you know, we're going to feel lust. We're going to be turned on. We're going to feel aroused. And when we're actually putting a dampener onto this, it basically makes us wrong in the core of our body. And it makes our
well, this is, Earth is the pleasure garden. We are here to experience pleasure. One of the things that I find just incredible is that women, you know, we're the ones that have been mostly shamed for our sexuality and for our, you know, for our lustful ideas and whatever, you know, these wicked women. But we are the only, you know, we're the beings that have an organ specifically designed to give pleasure. The clitoris is for pleasure. That's its only function. That is its only It's amazing. And yet, shame for that. It's like we were built to have pleasure. This is the Holy Grail. This is divine access, right? It's sacred. So I'm really astounded and quite moved, actually, by the amount of women and men who are waking up to this truth, to this knowledge, and this whole divine feminine rising on the planet. There's so many women, if you go on Instagram, women, you know, like celebrating the womb, celebrating our sexual organs, pictures of yonis coming up everywhere. It's just, to me, it's beautiful, and it is sacred. And, you know, some of it is real. Like there's pictures of people giving birth online now, and it's like, oh my God, we were never shown that before. But it's part of our natural makeup. So yeah, and it makes sense to me that money is linked to that, because money, I suppose, in many ways can buy pleasure. It's your abundance. If you have comfort in your life, then you have more access to pleasure. So.
But also what I've actually found is when you start to make yourself really wrong for the things that are so naturally felt, you start to make yourself wrong for having pleasure. And you start to not know yourself because you don't trust yourself, because like, oh my God, I just felt myself awaken and like completely aroused, like, because I see this guy down there and like basically you're just slapping it down. After a while, you make yourself really, really wrong for just a natural flow that's coming up into your body. And a lot of times what you would find with people like that, and I'm saying people like that not to discount, because I've got my elements as well that I've been working with, but what you find is that you'd say to someone, what do you want? And they would go, I don't know. because they've gone to the point now of squashing this down so much that they don't really trust their response anymore. They don't trust themselves to say the right thing, you know. And so for me, where it links into money is that as soon as you start feeling that you're making money in pleasurable ways, you start sabotaging. Or there's a sense of, like, for example, if you've got like artistry or creativity in your makeup and it feels like it's too in flow, money should be structured and it should be like contained. So it's like, basically, I need to go and do real work. You'll hear people saying something along those lines. Do you know what I mean? Because it's kind of like that pleasure zone, they haven't really connected into it. And the other thing that I found is that money, as you were just saying, money in and of itself means absolutely nothing. If you were on a like an island where it was just you and your Todd with bucket loads of money, it means nothing. So the money basically is all about projection. You command money by what you're being. And ultimately then, if that is the case, you need to come back to what you're being first and then to the money afterwards. What we want to do is to go chasing after the money and then project everything on the outside of ourselves, including our energy, and forget about who we are in the midst of all of that. So this money clarity thing is just like bringing it all back to yourself first. And then from this empowered, rooted state, command money. Do you know what I mean? Right. It's a completely different place. Yeah.
Absolutely. Amazing. And well, it makes sense because our pleasure center is also our creative center. And it's not just, you know, the creation of new life. It's the creation of, well, it's bringing our divine essence, our uniqueness into the world of form, isn't it? And I know that you and I are both very creative and creative thinkers, but it's breaking out of that idea that you can't make money. I mean, I've brought out my poetry book, and I think you've touched on something here, Tash, because it is a bit like, right, now I've got to actually get it out in the world. And I chose to self-publish because I wanted to keep all the rights to my work, and I didn't want somebody to come along and change it because it was all channeled, and to me it's beautiful as it is. I don't want to kind of put it into the academic zone or anything like that. But now there's a part of me that is kind of resistant to actually, you know, going out and not going out and promoting it, but seeing it as something bigger than what it is already. Like seeing it as being perhaps quite a successful book, because to me it is pure expression. It's the rawness of my emotions, and it's very connected to my femininity and my sexuality, and the wounds that come with that. So it's about really putting that out there. But it's amazing because whenever I'm brave with it, and whenever I actually express it, put it out there, or read a poem or do an event or something around it, people always say, wow, they're really healing, because it kind of invoke the deeper emotions that people haven't looked at themselves. It triggers something in them and brings that up to the surface to be looked at. And so I think more of us need to be kind of, I guess, more transparent in that vulnerability, or in that emotional creativity, using our emotions as a vehicle to transform. And there's our transition theme again. It keeps coming up, doesn't it?
Well, but as you were speaking there, I was getting a sense of the world would experience a loss if you didn't express that. You know, it would experience a loss because it would. That's what you're here to do. That's the reason. That's part of your journey, and there's such a profound, exactly like you're saying. When I feel into that, and I've seen some of your poetry, there's profound healing in that for people. And so it becomes not about you anymore. It becomes more about what's come through you, and will you be willing to let it go? Yeah. Let it go and make its own journey, you know?
Birthing it. Same with anything.
Yes.
You can't hold on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's the journey of manifestation and creation, right? Yeah. I mean, after you've created something, there's a sense of it. It's a Vesica Pisces. Vesica Pisces, two forms meeting, right? After you've created the thing in the middle, right? It basically goes off as an entity all on its own. It goes off and has its own life.
Yeah.
And that life, if healing is at the center of that life, it's a bit like a medicinal pill of some description. That's what I see when I hear into your poetry.
Thanks, Tash. It makes me think of like how we are so interconnected. I don't know if you're finding this. I find that in a lot of my healings now, a lot of the themes and the concepts coming up from client to client, very universal. Like you're seeing it in the individual, but then you're also seeing the same theme playing out on the global stage. And like a lot of the time when I'm doing my self-healing, I'm going in and looking at a concept or a theme, and I'm told, clear it for everyone. Clear it at the root. And I think it's that 100 monkey thing, isn't it? We make something possible when you open to another level of consciousness, or you become aware of a piece of wisdom, or you're able to transform a deeper emotional issue or block within yourself or within your client. Then it opens it out and makes it possible for other people to be able to do the same. It's a bit like the Olympic runners, someone breaks a record and that's the world record, but a year later someone surpasses that and breaks it again. And we're doing this evolutionary expansion thing through love and through going within and through, I guess, being willing to go and look at those raw, painful places.
Well, we basically communicate on so many different levels, and entrainment is one of the major ways that we communicate with each other, right? So all I need to do is to sit opposite you in silence, and our energy begins to merge, and I begin to feel you in myself and myself in you, That's basically, we're designed that way, right? That level of communication is always happening. So obviously, if I'm bringing a filter that's clearer on a particular aspect, it gives you the opportunity to witness that filter within yourself as being clearer. And so, yes, like I can feel the work that I do on, releasing my own blocks around, and also collective mindsets, right? I mean, collective mindsets are, women are supposed to be like this, or because I'm in this body, I'm like that, or do you know what I mean? All of these collective ways that we see ourselves that actually keep us really contracted. The sense is like when I release those, I release it both backwards and forwards. Like I could feel my grandmother and my great-grandmother cheering me on back there, going, yes, we feel that too. Do you know what I mean? And I truly believe that. I feel like whatever we do, we're not doing it in isolation. Everything that we do has a ricocheting effect, both forwards and backwards, basically. So absolutely.
Have you ever had like sort of evidence of a piece of work that you've done kind of seen a shift on the global stage, like when you've done some work for the planet, or if you've been looking at the bigger picture? Have you had turned on the news and gone, oh my God, that's like what I was just working on, that's what I just saw? Those kind of...
Perhaps not in that way, because when you ask me that question, I see you so clearly, because I feel like that's the work that you do.
I know, I want to know if other people kind of have it.
Yeah, for me, I see it very individually. Like the mirror just comes straight up on an individual level. So whatever I'm working on, it feels like every single client that actually comes to me is suddenly working on the same thing. Or like I'll go into a group or create a group, and it would be about that same thing. But perhaps maybe not so. I'm perhaps not so in tune to the global element as you are.
Basically. I think you're doing it, but you're doing it through each person and through yourself.
Yeah.
I want to know more about sort of your own innate gifts and how you experience them. I'm so interested in how people do work psychically and how they perceive the wider unseen world. So talk to us a little bit about your gifts. Like, obviously you're quite holographic. I think you kind of see, feel and everything, but what's your kind of predominant gift? How do you delve in psychically while you're doing
empath?
You're more empathic. Yeah.
And also the interesting thing is like, I feel like we come with certain filters that are already clear. So then people will go to you, oh, you've got that gift. but ultimately it's just basically because of whatever reason, that particular filter is clear. For me, I experienced in my life a lot of alienation quite early on. Like, for example, I ended up, when I was really young, going to an all-white school, and it was in the 70s. So it wasn't like there was a lot of friction there, but I just experienced myself as being alien. And then going over to Saudi Arabia with my parents and going to Pakistani and Arabic school, there was nobody that looked like they were from the Caribbean in those schools, right? So like I was completely, again, felt very alien. And that sort of story kept on a loop. And what I came to understand with that is that I had to actually be willing to stand as an individual, because I had to be willing to carry my own template and to honor my own template. And so it felt like that was coming forward from that work. But it also made me quite empathic. Like, basically, I had to kind of feel into people as to what was going on. Like, what was my situation? How did it relate to them? What was going on? Like, there was all of that going on. And it made me really hypersensitive at that point as well. So I've got that sort of sense where people have said to me that I've, you know, like, yeah, you're an indigo child. And what I gather from that is like, yeah, you are hypersensitive and really awkward.
I feel like you don't belong, and you've got to like,
you know, like really having to work to integrate. There was a lot of working to integrate. So then understanding the mechanics of integration, like that was really part of my early life coming up. So then all of that came into being really deeply empathic and being able to really sense into people's potential, and also to sense into their greater potential as well. And from that also came a lot of blockages, it felt like, and contractions. And because those were feeling so active and alive, there's a natural sense of wanting to expand. So the expansion story has just been with me from day one, you know, like expanding, release, expand, release, expand, release. That's just been my story. And so like that then naturally transitions into working with other people on levels where they want to expand and release, and working with people on a really intuitive empath level where I'm feeling into them. and from all of that, basically, it developed a kind of way of perceiving and referencing with energy, you know. Understanding that when you cut everything comes back to energetic form. I always knew that from, you know, the time I was like 7 years old. It was a sense of, there's something that's like really joining everything together. Like everything is really joined. Everything is like, that was plain as daylight for me, but I didn't really have the words for it. And so as soon as I actually understood energy work, it was like, yes, that's the thing. And so that allowed me to like really delve in more and more into that, and to really understand. And then the language of symbology comes out of that, and really beginning to perceive energy comes out of that, basically.
Oh, I love it. So Tash, is there anything else that you would like our viewers to know about you, or any message for our viewers before we go?
The message that I would have right now is that we are in a time and a place that is asking for non-judgment. I would say that plain. That's what's coming up for me. Because non-judgment is release work. Non-judgment is being able to see something that looks a little bit different to you, and to be able to lean in with curiosity. Non-judgment is that sort of sense of, actually, if that doesn't feel right, to lean back out, and not to have this big massive storyline and then running all over the place with this big massive storyline. Because ultimately when we do that, we end up with residue on our energy system that really doesn't need to be there. And so then it's like we are having to peel off this energy. And for me, when I say residue, I'm talking about when we're talking about things or talking about people, and we clearly feel that low vibration element of it, like our energy is dropping around the conversation. We're feeling less of ourselves as we're going more into that conversation. When we start to witness in ourselves in that place, is just to draw back and come back to center. You know, so for me, the final crux is non-judgment. That's basically, I'm really planted in that, and really planted in the practice of that right now.
Oh, it's gorgeous. Well, that is unconditional love, isn't it? It's
Yes.
that love without judgment. We're on the same page, girl. I love it. I love it. So how can people get in touch with you, Tash? How can people find you online?
Well, my online space is tashmitch.com. So tashmitch.com. And everything can branch off from there, basically. I'm also on Facebook.
I'll share links below and
Yeah.
Facebook and everything, so that if people look below the video, they can click on your links and find out more about you and
Thank you.
exciting things that you have coming up. And I'm gonna keep an eye on you, young lady. And I just want to say thank you so much for joining me today, and to all our viewers, thank you so much for watching. Please do, if you have any comments about the video, comment below. If there's anyone that you would like me to interview, I'm open to suggestions. If there's any questions or anything, just get in touch. And Tash, what else have you got coming up for the rest of the week? What's going on for you?
So basically, I'm still in my money clarity course, and that will actually then go on to Evergreen, so people could get hold of that online. And also as well, the next thing that's going to be developing is embodiment and love of self, that real deep embodiment. So I'm going to be taking that into group work as well, and allowing the wisdom of the group to inform all of us that way. And there's also one-to-one work that I do with people as well. So all of that's on my website. And before I go, I just want to commend you, Alex, and commend this work that you're doing, because it's so incredibly beautiful. The way that you actually reference it in the world is so beautiful, because you are so implanted in the world of spirit, in the world of expansion, and the world of new paradigm is what I would say, bringing in and downloading new paradigm. That's so much about what you're in and about. And so to then offer something that allows other people to reflect that through you is so beautiful to witness. So thank you. I'm so deeply honored. Thank you.
I wish we were in person so I could give you a hug.
Virtual hug.
Well, we must meet up soon anyway, honey. I think we need
absolutely
an actual in-person catch-up, so I can.
Yes.
And yes. To all the viewers, we're sending hugs through the screen as well. Thank you. And yes, do get in touch with Tash, and do let me know your thoughts on this video and any other videos that you might watch on my show, and any suggestions. I'm open to suggestions all the time for topics to talk about, etc. But for now, I just want to say love to you all, huge love to Tash, and thank you so much for watching the Alexandra Wenman Show.